What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my comprehensive review of Athos and Legendary Ayra banner. I'll be going over my tier list of Anima Mythics and Water Legendary units, and I'll be going over the builds for each and every one of them, and I'll also talk about how you can use the new fodder of these new units. So let us begin with Athos. A lot of people wanted him, including me, in the game. He's finally here as an Anima Mythic, which does make sense, but he doesn't have his 4-place tome, so he's a blue infantry mage, and he is the first AR-D's defense reinforcement slot unit for the Anima season. So he can enable the reinforcement slot, and he also boosts up your defense. I'll be talking more about that, about the reinforcement slot. So he is going to be having a lot of bulk, and he's basically going to be having a one-shot playstyle. So he has God Bless Aureola, and this is going to be giving him -1 special cooldown. So his Frost Moon is a 3 cooldown special, and he also has the effective damage against the magical foes, which are the mages, just like Guinevere. And for the allies that are in 3 rows and 3 columns centered on him, he gives them the attack, defense, and resistance +5 in the combat, and he also gives them the preempt pulse on their offensive specials. And if they're not able to make any kind of follow-up attack, or if they do not have any kind of brave effect, then they get an additional preempt pulse. So they basically get -2 special cooldown pulse if they are a really old and slow unit. So it does reward that kind of thing, but you don't always have to use those kinds of units with him. 1 preempt pulse is just fine on your offensive specials, and that is also helpful in AR-D's defense so that he can trigger the specials and also counter any kind of veiled drive scale effect, as you can offset it. And his weapon is only going to be active if there is any kind of ally in 3 rows and 3 columns centered on him. So if he's the last man standing in AR-D's defense or summoner duels, then his weapon is turned off and killing him is going to be easy. So he gets extra attack, defense, and resistance in combat depending on 20% of his visible resistance +5. So this is going to be anywhere from 16 to 18, and most of the time it is going to be 17 because he gets a lot of visible resistance out of his weapon, and he has incredible base resistance. He also has true damage based on 20% of his resistance. It is not going to be getting added into the AoE specials. And he also gets flat damage reduction based on 20% of his resistance, and this is not going to be there to save you against the AoE specials, but he naturally has such high resistance that he's going to be able to tank any kind of AoE special easily with a bit of Breath of Life support. And he also gets the preempt pulse for himself in the combat, so he can easily trigger Frost Moon, and he also is able to have a really interesting mage preempt effect. So again, if there's any kind of ally in 3 rows and 3 columns on him, and if he's facing any kind of mage, then he gets +10 attack in the combat, and he also has the Vantage effect. So that's why I call this the mage preempt effect, because only against mages he's going to be getting it. A lot of the dominant range threats nowadays are physical and they're not mages. I would say that the strongest mage right now is Attuned Micaiah. So against her, it definitely helps, but this is a Vantage effect. So if the enemy has got Hardy Bearing, then he's not going to be getting this Vantage. And I think that this is going to be really cool if you use him with Brave Sorin as an assigned decoy Far Savior in something like Summoner Duels, because he's going to be able to get this Vantage effect against any kind of mage, and that can really come in handy as a Far Savior with assigned decoy. And unlike the regular preempt effect, this doesn't say that this doesn't work with the save skills as an assigned decoy, so that is going to be really fun. And that is going to be his weapon. He also has a new special in Frost Moon, which is inhittable by any kind of mage, including flying and cavalry mages. And it's a 4 cooldown special, and it's basically Glacies but with 70% damage output, and it also pierces any kind of pierceable damage reduction completely. So I think this is a little too late because we have so much flat damage reduction that even, having this is not really going to be helping you, and we do not have as much pierceable damage on the absolute top tier units. But still, this can help on the high resistance units because they can get the full piercing and also scale off their damage using their resistance. For a lot of mages like Attuned Micaiah, for example, that are specializing in tank busting, a lot of times they want to run Astra so that they can have even higher damage output. So for those kinds of mages, they still do not want to run this. And the bonus effect of the special is that if the unit cannot make a follow-up attack, or they do not have any kind of brave effect, then they get the preempt pulse. So like I said, this is the bonus effect. This is not going to be the main thing, but it pretty much incentivizes you to use this kind of effect on very slow units that do not have any kind of guaranteed follow-up attack. And this way they can easily trigger Frost Moon and hit really hard. And this can also help you offset any kind of Scowl or Hush Spectrum effect with its preempt pulse. And it can also help free up your slot B skill for other skills that you could try and run. And the best users of this skill are going to be units like Duo Thor, who's incredibly slow, and she doesn't have any kind of guaranteed follow-up attack, and she has the self-pulse-up effect, so she can wait a few turns and then pre-charge her special, and then hit really hard, set up the haste terrain, and also provide the support. And Rearmed Sonia again gets even more wins, so she got Arcane Truthfire as her better weapon, and now she can keep her escape route Canto playstyle with the chip damage of hers and still get the Canto while getting the piercing on her special. So this is what I'm talking about. You can just free up your slot B skill for other skills, and you don't necessarily have to abide by the rule of the bonus effect that you gotta use this on a unit with no guaranteed follow-up attack and no brave attack. That's not how you should be thinking it. It's not that black and white, I would say, because here we have literally a unit who gets the guaranteed follow-up attack as a status. But still, she makes fantastic use out of this because she's able to support and get the true damage out of the Discord skill. And she also has the super quick and pulse effect. So it's pretty easy for her to immediately trigger it, even if she doesn't get any kind of preempt pulse out of Frost Moon. And her resistance is so high that this is going to be out damaging Flare. So it's going to be a really useful special. And for any kind of arcane weapon unit, this is really good because the modern arcane tomes like Blood Gang and Truthfire don't have a guaranteed follow-up attack. They also have the preempt pulse, so it stacks up with the preempt pulse of Frost Moon, so you can easily use this on many of the slow units. They also take advantage of Pulse Up Ploy, and I just have Dorothea with the placeholder weapon. Magical Lantern Plus is, I guess, something you could use until we get the new Arcane Tome. And you could also try and use this on many of the units that are there to provide the support with their debuffs. So Fallen Julia and Validar already debuffed the enemies, and now they can run Pulse Up Ploy and also get the full piercing with their incredibly high resistance. And Gatekeeper is Gatekeeper because of his slot B skill. He doesn't have the scope of running any kind of piercing skill in his slot B, and he also doesn't have guaranteed follow-up attack in his weapon, so he can try and do this at max investment. And you could also use this on many of the cavalry units because they didn't really have as many tools as the flyers or of course the infantry units. So now that we know for sure that Duo Sigurd is not getting any kind of refine, Arcane Blood Gang is perfect for him. He can debuff and support, and Happy is going to be getting a refine many months from now, more at the later end of 2025. And she does have the Time Pulse 3 effect in her weapon, and she doesn't have any guaranteed follow-up attack, so she can nuke with this. And any kind of slower cavalry unit like Letizia can also make use of it and try and stack up the true damage with Occultist Strike in the slot B. As I was saying before, there are exceptions where you can still run Frost Moon on a unit with a brave attack. So this is always going to be there. It's not like their guaranteed follow-up attack, which might get denied by something like null follow-up or a faster follow-up denial units. So they're always going to be getting the brave effect, but this actually helps them trigger their special a lot easily because they get the 2 hits. So Ninja Camilla has this option now, and on Brave Soren, he does get the null guard effect, and he's mainly going to be there for the assigned decoy support, so he could just stay there, have his special pre-charge, and on turn 2, he's going to be able to nuke something with the Frost Moon on his Brave attack, and also support with the Discord skill. And unlike Attuned Ivy, Summer Ivy doesn't really have her preferred skill, so she can also make use of this. And there are not a lot of units that want to run this with Lagoo's Loyalty because that kind of stat line is rare. But with Frost Moon, you can technically run Lagoo's Friend, but it is redundant with its damage reduction piercing, and Frost Moon is mainly going to be there to look pretty instead of Glacies, which you could have used, that still pierces the damage reduction with Lagoo's Friend. So Lagoo's Loyalty, the new skill, doesn't give you any kind of piercing That's its main criticism, but you get it with the special, and you also get the half frozen effect in the enemy phase. So if you really want to get it, then it could be like a side grade for a unit like Zane, and for Guinevere's, this is going to be their best option. And you could also run this on units that already have a preferred slot B skill, so again, they do not have the scope of running any kind of piercing skill. So for Legendary Julia, this can help her, and we do have Reeve as the rare free-to-play mages with the -1 special cooldown weapon, and Creation Pulse is also something you can use along with this special because the preempt pulses will be stacking up. So if you have enough negative status on the enemy, it is going to be something you can use. And Goto, even though he gets the guaranteed follow-up attack, he is incredibly slow and he is in Aether Raid's offense, so he wants to give the support with the Discord skill, and when the time comes, he wants to nuke something with the Lin Ring. Coming back to Athos, we do have his preferred skill in Beyond Reason. So this has got +10 visible stats to his attack, defense, and resistance. And these are the visible stats similar to Beyond Witchery of Rearmed Sonia. So this can help you with deploying, and if the foe initiates combat, or if foe's HP is at or above 75%, then you pretty much get extra attack, defense, and resistance depending on the number of negative status active on them and the foes in 3 rows and 3 columns centered on them. And this goes up to max 12, so it does have a hard cap, and this is not going to be unlimited like Res Velgar, for example, or anything like that. So that amount of penalty effects are going to be getting multiplied by 2, and then you get the extra stats. And he also has the attack, defense, and resistance unity built in this weapon. So if you debuff him with any kind of unit, then he gets more powerful and he gets insane amount of stats out of this slot A skill. He also has amazing stat swing because he ignores any kind of visible buffs of enemies' attack and resistance, so the dull attack resistance helps. And then he has got 80% pierceable damage reduction on the foe's first attacks if they can make a follow-up attack, which they are going to be doing because Athos is slow as a snail, so that is always going to be happening. And if they're not able to make a follow-up attack by some miracle, then he only gets 40% damage reduction. So this is of course the full pierceable damage reduction, but even if the enemy pierces half of it, he's still going to be having 40%, so it is going to be useful. And then he heals up 7 HP after the combat, so this skill does a lot of heavy lifting. And he has got attack resistance Discord. We did get this onto a Hathran, so this gives you amazing attack and resistance debuffs and a Discord debuff on the enemy. And Pulse Up Ploy is also here if you don't want to fodder Rune. So this has the Pulse Up effect, which can gradually let you pre-charge your special, and you still debuff the enemy for the exposure and deploy status. So you don't get the visible debuffs, but you technically get them with the Discord skill anyways. So this is incredibly synergetic kit, and he is going to be an amazing bulky mage because he has got so much resistance and defense, and he's so min-maxed that he's going to be getting the preempt pulse easily out of his weapon, out of the Frost Moon to trigger his special. So he has the one-shot playstyle, which I would say that is not all that good anymore because things do not die in a single hit nowadays. They just have so much flat damage reduction. So not having any kind of brave hit or follow-up attack can come to bite you back, but he's also there to be extremely bulky. So that's also one of his roles. And because he is a reinforcement slot unit, he can open that up, and a reinforcement unit is going to be showing up on turn 3 in Aether Raid's defense for your team, and it is going to be at start of the player phase for whoever is facing your defense. So in Aether Raid's defense, your reinforcement unit doesn't get the extra action after showing up, so that is only there for the Aether Raid's offense, and your reinforcement unit shows up at the same time when the enemy's reinforcement calling circle unit is going to be showing up, but they get to have their player phase first. So it is essentially going to be another unit that they have to kill, but because of the fact that we have got so many player phase tools like Safety Fence level 2, Emblem Sigurd, Emblem Lin Ring, just so many things that you can do that it's pretty easy to wipe the entire team until turn 3 where the reinforcement shows up. And it is mainly going to be a pain when you're not able to brute force through the enemy's team with your units. So if they have insane save skills and insanely bulky units, then you are going to be forced to play turn 3, and if you're tanking, then that is going to be an extra unit that you have to tank. So you can check out my Ether Raid's offense videos. You can see how you can, battle in the current meta and how insane the player phase tools have gotten. So right now, it is not going to be all that big of a deal, and the reinforcement for Ether Raid's offense is a lot better, honestly, which Rune gives in the light season. So this might be a case where we got Saros as the 7th slot unit, and then we later on got more insane units in that archetype. So he's a good unit, but his mechanic of the reinforcement is not as oppressive as it is for the Ether Raid's offense teams, where it is so amazing. For the pod collection, you get the extraction and stuff. So he is good, but his mechanic is not in the best place right now. But maybe when the tides turn to Ether Raid's defense, he can provide that kind of support and open up the reinforcement slot. And now let's take a look at my Anima Mythic tier list and where Athos ranks. So as the best Anima Mythic, I'm going to be having Freyr, and he was facing up the competition from Hathran, but in the last couple of weeks, he has been solidified as the best Anima Mythic because you auto lose if you do not have his cleansing, because we've got Rearm Layla that you could have Spark, and she inflicts the undefended status, and that along with Emblem Lin Ring and Emblem Lin herself, you can just slowly snipe every single unit on the enemy team. So their Far Savior is not even going to be coming into the question if you do not have Freyr to cleanse that. There's also Brattle Embla, but Rearm Layla is going to be a bit more common. So he's mainly going to be there for the cleansing. His combat is not the most insane, but you could give him some of the shinier skills to make it better. But mainly his job is just there so that your team does not auto lose to the carnage of Emblem Lin and her ring. And then we have got Hathran. So like I was saying, Hathran was definitely the best Anima Mythic for a while, and Freyr was more like the second, but now she is in the second spot. So she's mainly going to be there for the Divine Nectar, which is amazing for the pre-combat healing, and she herself is incredibly tanky as a frontliner, so she doesn't go down all that easily, and you need a lot of firepower. So she's really helpful with the pre-combat healing with her Divine Nectar, and it's completely immune to Fatal Smoke, and she also inflicts the Null Miracle status on the enemy and the deep wounds, so that also helps. But nowadays I kind of like the extra action of Divine Nectar a lot more, because you can just have a rally trap with it, and you can get an extra action with your unit, and then you don't really have to use a Dancer on your Ether Raid's defense. So Divine Nectar is also helpful for that. And then in the third position, I'm going to be having Athos. Unfortunately, I don't really think that he is in the top 2 of Anima Mythics, as I explained before, with the circumstance of the reinforcement slot for Ether Raid's defense, but still, he's the only one who can do it, and it's not like he's not offensively oriented. He has got a lot of true damage, he also hits really hard, and he also is really bulky, so he can use the Lin Ring and snipe something, and unless there's a tank that's facing him, it's gonna be hard to survive his Frost Moon. And he also has the use of functioning as a Far Savior in an assigned decoy team composition because of how bulky he can be, and you can also stack up more flat damage reduction with Lagoo's Friend, and then you can have Emblem Ike Ring, so you're able to have a lot of bulk. And he also has insane defense, so even on that side of bulk, he is going to be able to make full use of Breath of Life 4. And don't forget that he also brings the pre-impulse support for your team, and he can also be used with the Firm Cantoker, because that's also something you need against the Canto, and the end action protection does help you against the enemy Satyrs that might be coming after your team. And he's the only Anima Mythic unit in Tier 1 that can run Firm Cantoker. Hathran and Freyr cannot really do it. In Tier 2, I'm going to be having Mirabilis, so she's still pretty good because she is a melee dancer who has the resistance to run a lot of supportive skills, and she is bulky enough, and she can also provide the warping. But as I was saying before, we have such insane units with extra actions nowadays that dancers are not really all that needed for Ether Raid's defense. You can make use of the Divine Nectar, you have Brave Felix, Emblem Sigurd with their extra actions, and the thing is that you need to have both Near and Far Savior on your team, and then Freyr for the cleansing, and another strong nuke that can actually kill the other tanks. So each and every slot is so competitive that it's kind of hard to slot a dancer in that. And then we've got Formortis, who has definitely gotten a lot better because of all of the armor skills like Shield Fighter, Slick Fighter, which he can try and run. But the thing is that unlike Winter Formortis, he doesn't transform immediately, so he doesn't get the distant counter effect out of his weapon instantly, so you will have to wait, and that's the painful part because he's not going to be able to retaliate back. But still, he can function as a decent near savior, and he can also provide the higher ground support with the warp blocking if you're trying to have that kind of roll compression, so that is also an amazing tool that he has gotten. In tier 3, at start, I'm going to be having Duma, and it's amazing how he is here for such an old mythic. And the reason for that is because Safety Fence has got upgraded to level 2, and as I said, it is extremely oppressive with all of the tools. So with the catapult and with Duma's upheaval, you have the chance of breaking the safety fence of the enemy, and they do not get the safe turns to attack your team. So it's completely up to luck, but still it is a chance that you could take with him. And we do have tools like Emblem Celica Ring that you could use to have him warp, and he can also have a bit of warp blocking with High Dragon Wall, but not really all that much. And there's also Wings of Mercy 4 that he can utilize. He's of course not going to be having the combat like the modern units, but still he can hit decently hard for a surprise element, and the chance of breaking the fence of an enemy or maybe even Bolt Tower is not really all that bad for a tier 3 unit. And then we've got Zeros. So her Refine and Remix was good for the time, but nowadays we have got such an insane Remix and Refine for Legendary Fae, and you can see the stark difference. So at least she's able to give some stats with Wings of Light to her mythics and provide some support, but it's not the most insane support. Her combat is decent, but her bulk is nowhere gonna be near like Hathrin, for example. And now we do have the Spiked Wall, which you can try and use with her Dragon's Roar, which is the special that she prefers at max investment. And then in end of tier 3, I'm gonna be having Oter. Now, a lot of people meme Oter, and I swear, I'm not saying this because of bias, but he is the Cavline support unit. He is way better than Kadean Lind when it comes to giving out the unhindered movement status. Now that means that he's not all that relevant in Aether 8's defense compared to a lot of other titans that we've got. I mean, why would you use him over Freyr, Hathrin, or Athos? But still, in summoner duels, he is there as a 4 movement cavalier, and he hits really hard now with Brutal Shell Plus, so he can provide the support. He also has the Shadow Shift usage, so that all can add up to the utility for a Cavline team. And there are a lot of trench maps in Summoner Duels, so he is useful there. Then in tier 4, I'm going to be having Gulvig, and just like Fossier, she has had a big downfall. The reason being is that she doesn't hit hard enough, she doesn't have enough flat damage reduction, she just has the pierceable damage reduction, which is going to be just getting crushed by any kind of competent nuke or tank, as they will have piercing, and she will simply not survive. So even though she has got the extractions, it doesn't mean much if you're not able to live to tell the tale. And when it comes to the usage outside of Aether 8's defense, there is Summer Gulvig, who is simply superior in every single aspect. So you could try and run Windsweep to tickle the enemies, because they're not going to be having Null Counter Disrupt unless they're running Duo Fjorm. But there's Nidhogger and Attuned Hector, who is better than her now, I would say. So you could still try and do that and set up the Flame Terrain and set up the Fatal Smoke. And you could, of course, at high investment, try and stack up the true damage on her so that she can have a better damage output. Then I'm also going to be having Arvel. Their Weapon Refine and Remix is a bit far away, but unfortunately their support is simply not enough. With the Guard status, Guard doesn't really mean much nowadays because of the special jumps, the preempt pulses, and all of the shenanigans we have got, and a lot of units just have Null Guard. So again, it's not the most useful support. They can try and double down on that with the Discord and Deploy skill from Athos, and now Frost Moon is also an option, but still not the best with the weapon and the preferred skill that Arvel has got. And then in tier 5, I've got Thracier, so Her Remix and Refine is pretty much the stats, and then she's got the Desperation and Null Follow-Up effect. At least she can set up the exposure status, but it's really easy to do that nowadays with the ploy effects that we have got. So it's nothing too extraordinary, and her speed is also not the most insane. At least Lin Ring is something that you could try and use, and if you use her with the Triangle Attack and Dual Strike, then she can have multiple consecutive hits, and you can just try and nuke something with Dragon Fang. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any kind of piercing, and she doesn't have high enough resistance to make use of Frost Moon, so she's kind of stuck there. And then in the extreme last position, I've got Liv. He actually has gotten some new tools like Boulder, Attack Defense Excel, which you could try and use. But again, he is a melee unit who doesn't give any kind of support to his allies, so definitely really hard to justify using him in Ether 8's defense. But if you're going to be using him, then your best course of action is to use him as a jump scare with Emblem Celica Ring and try and make him bulky with Boulder and Attack Defense Excel, and maybe use his Slotsy for the utility that you could try and get out of him. Now let's take a look at Legendary Ayra. So she is a water legendary unit, and she is a sword infantry who can boost up your speed in the water season. And of course, she is a pair up unit. So here she has got Sword of Isaac as her preferred weapon. This gives her -1 special cooldown, so her Crusader's Astra is a 1 cooldown special, and at start of turn, if her HP is at or above 25%, then she gives herself and the allies in 2 spaces the +6 attack and speed buff, and the new potent follow-up status and the dull ult status. So potent follow-up status is extremely unique, and this is basically an extra attack. So if you're fast enough, then this is going to be your 3rd hit. That is going to be 40% of your regular attack strength. And if you're really slow, then it is going to be becoming your follow-up attack, and it is going to be 80% of your first attack strength. So this is extremely good for nuking because shield fighter armors do not get any kind of damage reduction on the 3rd potent hit. So having the 3 hits is extremely good, and now we have got Lin Ring, so you can run Brattle, Catria, or Winter Cordelia, just have the Brave attack, and then you can add in the potent follow-up attack. Now the thing with this is that you cannot use any kind of unit with this kind of potent follow-up status, because they need to have enough strength, enough true damage to make the 3rd hit matter. Otherwise, you're going to be doing extremely low damage, and it really wouldn't matter much. So an example I can give is Trasvalgar. Both Mythic and newer version, both of them are excellent potent users, and there is also Brave Crom because of his armor effective damage and the higher ceiling of the true damage of these units. They're able to make use of the potent follow-up attack much better. So you need to have certain amount of firepower to make the good use out of it, and the more true damage, the better it is. And you could also, try and use this on units that already have a brave weapon, like Ninja Lucina, for example. She can, have the 5 hits, have a lot of true damage, and trigger her curve shot like multiple times in a single round of combat. So that is devastating, and that is the kind of unit you want to give this potent follow-up to. So of course, modern units get even more powerful with it. And you also want to make sure that you have some damage reduction piercing, because you don't really want to get stopped by the pierceable damage reduction that many of the units often have on the follow-up attacks. So, some damage reduction piercing, like 50%, is quite nice. You don't need to have the full piercing, but just some to make sure that your damage output isn't affected too much is going to be nice. And we also have Desert Marissa, so she can give you the brave attacks as well from a distance, and then you can have the potent follow-up status, and then just have multiple hits with the quad attacks and then the potent hit. So the other units that get this potent follow-up attack are not going to be having the potent follow-up strength at 100% like Ayra or like Emblem Marth. And do note that potent follow-up does not stack with the potent hits. You're not going to be having 6 hits. That's not how it works. But the speed difference necessary to make a follow-up attack does stack up. So you pretty much add that up to 50, but the actual hits do not stack up with the potent. So if you run this with someone like Bridal Sharina or Emblem Marth, they're not going to be stacking up the potent follow-up attack hits. She also gives out the Dowalt status, which is extremely good for tanking, and it's also useful in arena as a legendary unit as you ignore any kind of visible buffs of the enemies, and it can also help you against a lot of the bonus doubler strats. And for her combat, if her HP is at or above 25%, then she gets extra stats depending on 15% of her visible speed added with 5. So this is usually going to be around 13 to 14 to all of your stats. And keep in mind that Speed Taker's great talent does add towards the speed and all of the stats that you get out of it. So it is your visible speed technically, and the potent follow-up strength of legendary Ayra is 100%. So her potent follow-up attack is going to be doing the full damage, and we have seen that with Emblem Marth, with Emblem Lyn, Ullr's remix and refined. So we already know how it works. And it also gives her the true damage based on the number of bonus status effects active on her and the penalty status active on the foe. And it is going to be max 5, and then it is going to be multiplying it by 5. So it does have a hard cap, and it is going to be 25 true damage basically. And unlike Restvalgar, she doesn't get limitless true damage. So still like 25 true damage per hit, as the cap is insane with the amount of hits that she can get and the special damage she does. And she also gets 2 instances of flat damage reduction. So this can be up to max 15 flat damage reduction, and she gets another instance of flat damage reduction when the enemy triggers a special. So it is similar to the Excel skill that we have seen before. So it's the same concept. And she also heals up 7 HP after the combat. So extremely stacked weapon. And her special is just as stacked, and it is the second coming of Regnal Astra. Really reminds me of those days. So when the special triggers, it does boost her damage by 40%, and she gets the full piercing on her special triggers. And this is really important because she doesn't need to have any kind of passive piercing, and this is quite strong. She also gets the preempt pulse before her first attack, and then she has got the follow-up preempt pulses. And it is pulses with plural. So on all of her follow-up attacks, she gets the preempt pulse, which means that she's going to be consecutively triggering her special, which is going to be making it really, really hard to tank. And if that was not enough, then on her follow-up attacks, the enemy's defensive specials get disabled. And that is a big blow to the shield fighter armors or, godlike reflexes and stuff like that. And we have already seen this before on Spring Carla, so it is incredibly strong, and it is going to be destroying a lot of near saviors and tanks. And she also has the beacon type of damage reduction on her next attack by 40%, and this is going to be once per combat, and it is going to be unpierceable. So she also has a good amount of bulk to live the hits with the flat damage reduction of her weapon, and then the special and also the Excel skill that she comes with. So she is a nuke, and she is basically what Emblem Marth should have been, but I guess that would have been too early. But after Brave Felix, the standard for sword infantry units is extremely high, and Ayra is basically following that. So Excel is amazing with her offensive playstyle, and she also has Speed Taker 4 as her slot B skill, and this is quite soon after Emblem Lyn. We still haven't got a second unit with Momentum 4. So this does give you the great talent. It also has Null Guard, and it also has the true damage, which is the most important part of it as you get to nuke really hard and stack it up with her weapon. And you also have the null penalties to your speed, so that is also helpful against the debuffs. And then she comes with a new skill in Brutal Tempest. So this is going to be a variant of Endless Tempest, but instead of giving you the dull all effect, it instead gives you the Canto Distant Traveled +1. So max this can be 4, and you do not ignore the visible buffs of the enemies, but you get the Canto, which is really good for retreating as an infantry unit. And again, it is going to be available for the infantry and flying units, and you of course get the +1 movement, and you also get up to +3 stats in the combat depending on the spaces moved. So this is going to be a side grade to Endless Tempest, and it can be argued that it is an upgrade because it's a lot easier to outsource the dull alt status nowadays with even free-to-play units like Marnie, and Legendary Ayra herself gives the dull alt status, and it's not really easy to outsource. Canto distance traveled +1, that is not a thing. The highest Canto amount that you can outsource is from Ninja Lucina's Future Witness, and that is Canto 2. And usually you're going to be having the Canto 1 status. So Canto distance traveled is extremely powerful when you combine this with Emblem Celica Ring, because you're going to be traveling far away and you're going to be able to retreat far away. And if the enemy does not have some kind of Canto control, then you're going to be able to retreat really far. And even if they do, you're at least going to be having Canto 1. So Brutal Tempest is going to be really helpful for many of the player phase and offensive units. And it is exactly what a lot of units were missing, because they want to run some other emblem ring other than Emblem Sigurd. So now this can free up their ring slots, and basically you get the extra movement and Canto out of your slotsy skill. And it is going to be a game changer for Panette, because her optimal build in Arena does want to use Emblem Marthring to have a 1 cooldown gust, which then she can pre-charge with the time pulse of her weapon, and she just wants to trigger it twice in a single round of combat. And now she has got perfect attack speed and tempo echo to just be self-sufficient and not miss out on those effects. There's a bit of overlap with tempo echo and speed taker, but still it's not the biggest deal, as you do get the true damage out of speed taker, which again is the main takeaway from this skill. And previously she did want to run Endless Tempest, but if you also have Marnie in your arena core, then you already get the dull alt status. So again, you're able to just have more efficiency with your skills. And Legendary Dimitri also gets better, as he's able to function in the player phase much better. He already has the piercing and the full tempo, and he also has good amount of true damage out of Atrocity. He is one of the original high damage units, so this is perfect for him. And we also have a player phase refine for Catherine. She does have the potent follow-up attack and treachery, and because she lagged a -1 special cooldown weapon, she really wants to run Emblem Marthring, and she just wants to get the piercing. And you could also run this on many of the offensive Brave weapon users, especially the dual phase Brave weapon units that want to function as a frontliner with a spiked wall skill. So Ninja Diamond does come to mind, because he needs to be within 2 spaces of an ally to have his weapon be enabled, so he needs to retreat after attacking, and that's why Canto is critical out of his slotsy skill. So it is going to be really nice. And like I said, Emblem Celica Ring is solid with this skill, because you're able to warp away, and you basically have multiple ways of having just extended reach with the +1 movement and also the warping. You could also run this on many of the dancers, especially flying dancers, because if you run Rain Snap, then they do not get the +1 movement if they are a refresher. So you gotta run Endless Tempest or Brutal Tempest so that they could get the extra movement. And because they're dancers, they're gonna be dancing most of the time, and that's why Canto out of this is nice, as it frees up your slot B skill, and you do not have to run Emblem Sigurd Ring. And this could also be run with many of the inedible weapons and offensive weapons like Jihana Lance, which has the damage reflection against Spiked Wall, is amazing. And this could be run with a lot of the modern arcane weapons. Arcane Giant Axe is the main example here that I've got. So on a lot of these older units, they do not have enough bulk to always tank things like Camilla or Ninja Shamir, and you want to try and be a bit offensive at times, because you already have these kinds of fast tanks. So just mixing things up is really fun, and this is what it helps you with. So you could try and use the Speed Taker and also run Emblem Marthring to have a 1 cooldown gust and a 1 cooldown no quarter. So with the special jump of Arcane Giant Axe, you immediately trigger it, and then you can trigger it on your double as well. So it is really helpful with the Null Guard. And you could also run this on an AoE build, as these arcane weapons do give you the true damage, so it does have good synergy with momentum and also the slash sparrow skills. Coming back to Legendary Ayra, she is one of the best sword infantry units in the game without a doubt, and she is in the ranks of Brave Felix when it comes to being a really unique sword infantry unit that stands out from everyone else. So she provides the really unique potent support and she also has insane nuking potential herself. So she's not lacking when it comes to her own combat, and she's not just a support unit. And we have got so many player phase tools now with Lin Ring that you could abuse with Triangle Attack or Dual Strike. And now we have got Desert Marissa, who gives you the Brave effect from far away, so you can get that potent follow-up attack, and you also get that in the enemy phase, which is really amazing. And we also have Emblem Lin herself, who can give out the Desperation status. There's also Fallen Ursula, and any kind of dancer can just run Firestorm Dance and give you the Desperation status, and then you can have the consecutive hits. And if the enemy doesn't have Hardy Bearing, then it is going to be really hard for them to tank so many of the hits, especially if you have a lot of true damage. And for Ayra herself, she is going to be lacking the full null follow-up, so perfect attack speed or null follow-up in Sacred Seal or in the Slot C with infantry null follow-up can help, and Fatal Smoke does help you against the non-special miracles and against the healing. And Spiked Wall is also an option if you want to have some flat damage reduction in your slot B and you want to have the Bulwark effect, which can come in use in something like Summoner Duels, so I can see that being useful. And Deep Bonus Doubler can also help if you're trying to tank. She gives herself the visible buff, so she can easily try and use that. But she mainly wants to nuke more in the player phase than she wants to tank, if it makes sense. She still has good amount of flat damage reduction if you want to do that. And now let's take a look at my Water Legendary tier list. So Legendary Ayra is in her own tier. The difference between Ayra and the next unit in the Water tier list is really drastic. She is a modern unit and she has a lot of support and also nuking, and she also scores really high in Arena, and she can also be useful in every single game mode. So I'm going to be having over here, and like I said, you mainly want to give her null follow-up in some kind of way. Emblem Celica Ring is going to be her main ring, and in Arena for the scoring, you could run Distant Counter Melee Sacred Seal, and she can also fully buff up an ally with Rally Defense Res. Then in tier 2, I've got Legendary Ninian, who is an amazing refresher in Arena, and she has gotten many new tools in the span of last couple of months. So she can run Barricade for the full warp blocking. She has got the Cantrip skill. She has got Emblem Sigurd Ring that she can use. She has got Shadow Shift and even High Dragon Wall, which can be useful for just blocking the warping of the ranged units. But it is mainly there for the scoring because it's the only 400 SP scoring skill for Arena, and you also gotta run Distant Counter Dragon Sacred Seal for the scoring. So yeah, Arena scoring is a bit weird. So even though she doesn't have much resistance, she wants to run these high scoring skills like Dragon's Roar and High Dragon Wall. And she can also make use of Shadow Shift in her slot C, and she can get multiple actions, and her combat isn't all that bad compared to many of the other dancers, so she can score well and also be really helpful with the support. Then I've got Legend Camilla, so her insane pre-combat damage was something else when she came out, but since then it has been countered with Breath of Life, with Divine Nectar, so she's not going to be all that insane, but still her weapon is decent, at least for Arena usage, and she also has good support with Spoil Rotten, giving the damage reduction piercing status, which I would argue nowadays is more useful as units do not have piercing, and instead of running any kind of piercing skill, they just want to run something that can give them the true damage. So that's why her support is nice, and her sabotage effect is also really good. She has got an Emblem Lin Ring that she can use to nuke and set up the Deadly Miasma haste terrain, but just be careful to not use Deadly Miasma with Flared Sparrow because the terrains are going to be clashing, and being a flyer, she can run Guidance for. And then we've got Legendary Chrom, and it's amazing how he's still so good and so useful and still workable. He has got to be the best, oldest Legendary unit in my opinion, and he can nuke from a distance with Triangle Attack, Dual Strike, and he can even kill a lot of modern red Far Saviors like Attuned Hector. He doesn't get a lot of true damage, but still he can get the uncapped stats with the visible status effects, and nowadays stacking up the visible status effects is really easy because every other unit has something that they can give out, so you can use that and use it to nuke with him. He has also gotten the Link skill, which can also give him some true damage. I do prefer Curve Shot on him a bit more than Deadeye, and he can still use his assist to then position himself and just nuke with the Lin Ring, and you can also make use of the armor effective damage that he has got. That still keeps him relevant along with all of the tools. And then in tier 3, I'm going to be having Legendary Male Byleth. So I do have him at Plus and Merge on my free-to-play account, so I have extensively used him. And previously, his biggest issue was the scale effect, but that is least of his worries now because the units nowadays have so much flat damage reduction that I have trouble killing even a free-to-play unit like Marnie, who appears frequently at Plus and Merge. So you want to have Fatal Smoke 4 and make use of the flexibility that his remix brings you with Sublime Heaven 2. At least he pierces the damage reduction, and his main way of stacking up the true damage is going to be with Occultist Strike. I hope Windsweep 4 comes out soon because he really needs that in Arena so that he can safely attack and just kill things and maybe get some true damage. And he can now use the Lin Ring. Previously, he could also use the Sacred Ring, which you can still use. And then I've got Legendary Guinevere. So she is not that old of a unit, but she's also not all that strong by the modern standards. Her healing is kind of underwhelming compared to what we have now with Breath of Life. So it really doesn't stand a chance. And she also doesn't get a lot of stats out of her weapon. She can make use of some of the new skills and stack up the flat damage reduction, but still, she is not going to be as insanely bulky as some of the other bulkier mages, and she is going to be needing a bit of support to function at her peak potential. And then I've got Legendary Azura, so we've got a lot of refreshers and dancers, and +1 movement is given out really easily, and she unfortunately doesn't really score all that high, and she also doesn't have the offenses that some of the dancers have nowadays. But still, being a flying dancer always proves useful as you have a lot of really good skills. And then we have Legendary Leaf in tier 4. So with him nowadays, you really want to focus on stacking up as much true damage as you can. You could even try and run the Ploy skill, and you could also try and run the Fortress 4 because it does give you the true damage along with the Canto, and Emblem Celica Ring is helpful. But in Arena, I think that Niran Zeal 2 isn't really something you should be running because the extra action doesn't mean much if you're not even scratching the opponent. And Niran Zeal is unfortunately not a damaging special, so Curve Shot is something that he can try and use and just stack up the true damage. Unfortunately, he is going to be lacking on the damage reduction piercing as he wants to run Curve Shot a lot more than Deadeye, and thankfully he does have Null Guard, which not a lot of Cavaliers have got, so he can definitely try and work it out. And then I've got Legendary Dimitri, so a lot of competition when it comes to Lance Infantry Omni tanks as well, with Attuned Chimera, with Desert Ike. So he doesn't really have as much bulk or the flat damage reduction, and mainly he's going to be functioning as an offensive unit in the player phase. Of course, in Arena, you might want to run Distant Counter Melee for the max scoring if you want to, but he does want to get some kind of null follow-up support, or he wants to be run with Panette in Arena so that he could just pre-charge his Gust and then trigger it twice in a single round of combat. So he can still pack some punch and his debuffs can be helpful, but he doesn't provide as much support. And then we have got Legendary Sita. Honestly, I was really close to putting her in tier 5, and she might be borderline tier 5, but the good news is that she gets a refine and remix in March of 2025. So hopefully she gets a good one because her weapon is not all that good, and Jihana Lance is just better offensively, and even her slot B is not all that good and it can easily be replaced by a lot of modern slot B skills. But at least she doesn't have to run any kind of dual skill to score, and she's a flying unit who can have decent support that could be put out there, and that cannot be said for a lot of the tier 5 units here because they need the dual skill to score in Arena, which is not good. These are one of the worst skills that you could have nowadays because you need the extra effects. But thankfully for Fiorm, she does have Jihana Lance now, so she can stack up the reflection with her Ice Mirror, and she's got Lagoose Friend, so she can still have a modern build. But in Arena, it is going to be a bit tough when it comes to tanking against these modern threats. And then I've got Legendary Erica, so Even Brave Erica nowadays is kind of struggling to kill units with her effective damage and her true damage, so you can imagine how it is for Legendary Erica. It is extremely tough, and pretty much her weapon and sloppy skill are now replaceable by the generic inheritable skills, which is always sad to me. And even an old weapon like Arcane Devourer at least gives you -1 special cooldown for it. And then in the very last position, I've got Legendary Ryoma. So he has got it really hard with Raijinto. It's a distant counter weapon, and he paid the distant counter tax, so it just has null follow-up and that's it. So Arcane Devourer is just better, and he's in no position to tank with his stats in these days. So he wants to function in the player phase, and he is going to be needing some heavy investment. Hopefully the third Arcane Sword can help him a bit, because Arcane Devourer does not give him enough stats nowadays. The best value on this banner has to be in the red color in my opinion, because Nidhogger and Legendary Ayra are just too strong individually, and they also give out the support. And then we have got Rearm Marianne, who also is a pretty good support unit with her special, and she also has the rearmed value. And Arcane Blood Gang is the best red tome that we have gotten, so Red Pole is by far the winner in my opinion. Blue is a close second because of Athos, of course, and Emblem Celica color sharing with him. And all of these Emblem units are pretty much must-haves, so if you still haven't gotten her like me, then I guess you could try. And there's the best Infantry Omni Tank in the game, color sharing with these units in Attuned Chimera. So her Sandstorm is insane with how much damage she does. And even though we have gotten Desert Ike recently, I still like Attuned Chimera, and she also is an attuned unit, so she can give you the fodder and not vanish from your barracks. In colorless, Lorather is the main unit. Unfortunately, he is still a really strong and powerful meta unit with his forced assign decoy. He's not as tanky as Nidhogger because he doesn't have the conditions like her weapon, which always stay on. Unfortunately, he's not color sharing with the best units. Legendary Lelir can still function as an Omni Tank, but we do have Winter Duo Alir now, who can just do it better. And we also have Galvig, and like I explained, she is not the best Mythic, and even her fodder is kind of old now, with the pre-combat damage being forced out. And then finally, we have got the Green Pool as the last spot, because Ash and Fogado are really niche, and Grand Strategy does get nullified by the ploy effect that we have got nowadays so much. So Legendary Male Robin also has a bit of a tough time. So you could try and wait it out until then, as getting the merges on the Holoforms banner might be a bit easier, and you also get the premium skills. The next month we're going to be having an Anniversary Hero Fest and also the new Valentine banner. Last year's Valentine banner had Dual Leon, so it could have something insane. And then Ash and Legendary Nana are going to be getting their remix, so you could try and finish them up. And there's going to be another new Heroes banner with probably a new attuned or rearmed unit. And then finally a new Earth Legendary unit could also happen. I think that it could happen because they had in the calendar, in the schedule, this banner named as the Mythic Hero banner, because Athos was the lead unit and Legendary Ayra was the second unit. So maybe with that logic of rotation, they could have a Legendary unit in February. We usually get a Legendary unit in February that has the score bump in terms of arena scoring. And in March, we could also have the Hero Rises and Emblem Hero banner just drain everyone's orbs. So next month, if we get a Legendary, it is going to be an Earth Legendary likely. And it seems like it is going to be a colorless with color sharing with Mythic Loki and Ectinier. This banner is not going to be as strong compared to this month's Mythic banner, but I think that they might be cooking up some kind of Healing Hands Hero Fest, because Res Valgar, Hathrin, Ectinier just could happen with that, and also Ratatosker. So we'll see if that happens, and I hope this can help you plan your summons better. You can click the link on the screen right now to check out my recent Ether Raids run, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as fast as it took a Mage damage reduction piercing special. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.